UFC is known for being the best promotion for mixed martial arts and having the best fighters on planet Earth, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. The highest skilled fights in every single division. Now, by the thumbnail, I have some pretty hot takes. I feel like some of these are pretty easy, 125, 205, of what the highest skilled fights is, but we're going to be going from the hottest takes to the coldest takes. Starting off, I believe for 185 middleweight, Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker is arguably the highest skilled matchup of all time in that division. Now, there's a lot of different options that people are going to be mad at that I didn't put. For one, Anderson Silva. I do believe he is the GOAT of 185, the middleweight GOAT. But the guys he was facing, they were not as skilled as Whittaker or Khamzat. That's very obvious. And when he was facing guys towards the end of his career like Israel Adesanya, he was washed. So it doesn't really count because he wasn't as skilled as he used to be in that matchup. So we can't really count that. And Anderson Silva, yes, he was way ahead of his time, but that means that the guys that he was facing were not as skilled again. So for that reason, I don't have Anderson Silva versus like Chael Sonnen. I don't think that that's the highest skilled matchup, and I feel like most people would agree. Now, the other option people would be upset about, Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya, either the first fight or the rematch, that is not the highest skilled matchup in the division, in my opinion. Part of the reason we saw both of those guys take each other down, and I know Khamzat finished Whittaker in the first round, so it's not a great look, but if either of those guys fought Khamzat Chimaev in the same form at least, I know Pereira was able to stuff Magomed's takedowns, but he wasn't as good back then at MMA because he just started as he is now. His takedown defense has definitely improved. We saw that from Yuri 1 to the rematch with Yuri to the Magomed fight. I mean, he was getting taken down by Adesanya. Khamzat would finish both of those guys in the first round, arguably right now today, but even back then, I believe he would finish both of those guys pretty easily. So for that reason, I don't think that it's the highest skilled matchup. Maybe the highest striking skilled matchup, but overall, I just don't think so. And then Dricus du Plessis, that's another one. I don't think that Sean Strickland is as skilled as Whittaker or Khamzat. He could beat Whittaker, I think, but I don't think he's as skilled. And for that reason, I don't think Dricus versus Strickland 1 or 2 is the highest skilled matchup. Now, Dricus versus Whittaker, some people would say, oh, that should be the number one. But the reason that's not number one is because Dricus wasn't as good as he is today. He's improved every single fight by a lot. We saw that from the first Sean fight to the second one. And then Dricus versus Khamzat, when that fight happens, if that fight happens, it'll definitely replace this one as the highest skilled matchup. I know people talk about Dricus like, oh, you know, he's a goofy fighter, this and that. He's still very skilled. He still is pretty technical. Dricus versus Adesanya, that's up there. I think that that's number 2 in my opinion. But still, I just think that Khamzat is so skilled and Whittaker is also so skilled. I think Whittaker, he doesn't have as good of a chin as Adesanya, but in terms of skills, I think he's right up there with Adesanya. And for that reason, I think that this is slightly higher. I get it wasn't as competitive as a fight, so it's kind of hard to argue that. But still, I believe that this is the highest skilled matchup at 185. Moving on to welterweight, I have Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. Now, this definitely could be GSP versus Matt Hughes. That's another good option. But the main reason I'm putting this here is I feel like both of these guys are so underrated and so underappreciated. I feel like so many people talk about these guys as if they have no striking, they're boring grapplers, which you could say they're kind of boring. They've had boring fights. That is true. This fight, and when the rematch, if the rematch happens, it's going to be more skilled than Colby versus Usman, the first fight and the second fight. They are way better on the feet than both of those guys. They don't have the same power as Usman, but still, they're more skilled on the feet, in my opinion. They are better grapplers than both of those guys. I truly think so. I think they're both, again, extremely underrated on the feet. I think GSP, I don't know if they would beat GSP. I really think that they would give GSP a very tough fight, and I think they would both beat Kamaru Usman, in my opinion, even in his prime. I know Usman has power, so he may be able to knock them out, but Usman, he was having super tough fights with Colby Covington. He arguably lost the rematch. I think he won, but it could go either way. The first fight, he was arguably losing. I thought it was 2-2. Could have been 3-1 Colby, though. Burns, he got dropped by Burns. Burns was giving him a really tough fight. Masvidal, after rewatching the first fight, that was also extremely close. I just feel like both of these guys are better and more well-rounded strikers. And I think when the rematch happens, this will be the most skilled fight at welterweight. I think both of these guys are super underrated. I know that's a pretty hot take. I know a lot of people don't like them, especially Bilal Muhammad, but he's still good. I get it, he's boring, he's still good. I think that this is the highest skilled fight at 170. Moving on to lightweight, 155, the highest skilled matchup arguably ever. And honestly, I don't even think it's arguably. I think that this is the highest skilled matchup of all time. Two top 5 fighters ever, both in their primes, number 1 pound for pound, number 2 pound for pound. I don't think that's ever happened before. The rematch, obviously, way too short notice. You could say the first fight, Islam also took it, quick turnaround in Australia, not at his absolute best, but still one of the highest skilled matchups of all time, one of the best fights of all time. Moving on to bantamweight, there's a lot of different options. I have Dominic Cruz versus TJ Dillashaw. I feel like that Cruz was just kind of washed when he fought Henry Cejudo. He was coming off of like a 4-year layoff, injured, and it was relatively short notice. Dillashaw versus Aljo. TJ was obviously injured during the fight. Aljo versus Cejudo. I feel like Cejudo was like a little step behind. He wasn't completely in his prime. Merab versus Umar, that's super close. I think that may be second. But Umar, he wasn't in his prime. He's still super young. If they rematch within like a year before Merab is too old, that will probably replace this. But right now, I think it's TJ versus Dominic Cruz, in my opinion, both in their primes. I forget when it was, like 2016, 2017, something like that. Moving on to featherweight. I have Ilya versus Volk, and I think this is pretty obvious. I think Ilya is more skilled than Max Holloway, so I don't think it's Ilya versus Max or Volk versus Max, any of those fights. Aldo versus McGregor. I think that both of these guys are better than both of those guys. I think Ilya is better than McGregor. I think he would beat McGregor even in his prime. I think Volk obviously is better than Aldo. There's no argument. I don't care. Even Aldo in his prime, whatever, Volk still beats him. And I just think that this is the obvious choice. Obviously, you have Aldo versus Max. A ton of very skilled fights, but this is the obvious choice. Moving on to heavyweight. This is, again, I feel like pretty easy. Stipe versus DC, but it cannot be the third fight in the trilogy. DC was a little washed at that time. He wasn't at his best. I think it has to be the second fight, I would say, is the highest skilled matchup of all time. The first fight, they both were in their primes, but I feel like they still were in their primes in the second fight, and it was a little bit more of an actual fight. It wasn't really a first round finish. So for that reason, I think this is the highest skilled matchup. But if Aspinall and Jones fight and Jones looks like prime Jones, it's gonna be tough, because the only way that happens is if John Jones wins. That will probably replace this, but still, I think Aspinall wins that fight. So I don't think, because if Tom Aspinall goes out there and knocks out John Jones, people are going to say Jones is washed, he's old, it's whatever. And Aspinall, he won't be able to display all of his skills, his takedown defense, if he goes out there in the first minute like he always does and knocks out John Jones. So for that reason, it probably won't be replacing it unless Aspinall is able to win the first 2 rounds. But Jones, Aspinall starts to slow down. Jones takes over in the end. It's a close fight. This will probably stay as the highest skilled matchup of all time at heavyweight. Moving on, flyweight. This is pretty easy. Demetrius Johnson, Henry Cejudo. Has to be the second fight, though, because the first fight, Henry Cejudo, was not in his prime yet. I think Demetrius Johnson finished him, if I'm not mistaken. The second fight, super close. Really could have gone either way. I think when I watched it, I think I scored it for Demetrius Johnson. This is a pretty obvious choice. And then lastly, light heavyweight, 205, John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. But again, it has to be the first fight. Not only because the second was a no contest. John Jones, he was better earlier on in his career. I think that may be a hot take. Around like 2013, 2014, 2015. I think that was him at his absolute peak. I feel like he started to slow down later on in his career. And I know he has 2 finishes at heavyweight. they're just not as good opponents. Old man Stipe. Plus, you have Cyril Gane, no takedown defense compared to Daniel Cormier. DC was in his physical prime in the first fight. I think that this is definitely the highest skilled matchup of all time at 205. A lot of different options, though. You have DC, you have Gustafsson in the mix, very good, but this is the obvious choice. But yes, I have some pretty hot takes, especially the first two. Let me know what you disagree with specifically. But yeah, that is it for me. Let me know what you think.